Okay, in this lesson we're going to take a look at adding integers. And just as a refresher about integers, remember that they are all the positive whole numbers such as 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. They are all of its opposites, which is a key word in this lesson, like -1, which is the opposite of 1, and -2, which is the opposite of 2, and -3, which is the opposite of 3, and so on, as well as 0. So integers are all of those, the positive whole numbers, the negative whole numbers, and 0. And today we're going to be looking at how to add those integers together. But before we actually do that skill, not only do we need to review opposites, but we need to review what happens whenever we combine opposites. So we're going to be using this website a lot. And first I want to take a look at those opposites. For example, if I have a positive 1 and I have a negative 1. So this would be like having $1 and then like losing $1. And whenever you combine opposites, a positive 1 and a negative 1, if you'll watch what happens here when I combine these two, they disappear. Because if you had $1 and then you lost $1, you would have no money left. Same thing for, there are two positives there. And if I put together two negatives, so two positives plus two negatives, which are opposites of each other, whenever I combine those together, I again end up with 0. And this would happen no matter what number you used, as long as you added its opposite. So 4 positives, the opposite of 4 positives would be 4 negatives. And when I combined those, every single pair would give me 0, and so my sum would be 0. So our first important statement to know is that any number and my airliner decides to act up every once in a while, so you kind of have to just pause and hesitate. Any number plus its opposite equals 0. So any number plus its opposite equals 0. That's going to be key for whenever we start adding integers that are not opposites of each other. For example, let's go back and take a look at our website again. And the problem that they've given us here is 2 positives plus 3 negatives. So let's model 2 positives here and 3 negatives. When we combine these, remember that a positive and a negative, when we put those together, they're opposites of each other, and that would give us 0. Well, actually, it won't yet. Let me press continue first. Now it will allow me to. If I put together a positive and a negative, that gives me 0, and that one gives me 0. And now the site is asking us, well, how much is left over? And if you notice, we have one chip left over, and that chip is a negative chip. So our answer here would be -1. And if we check, that is correct. Okay, so 2 positives plus 3 negatives give us -1. Let's take a look at another example. 4 positives, so 1, 2, 3, 4 positives, plus 2 negatives, 1, 2, And I'm going to press continue this time. And now it's going to allow me to simplify. So we're going to combine a positive and a negative. Anytime you add opposites, those will give us 0. So they disappear on us. There's another 0. I've made all my pairs of 0 that I can. And so 4 positives plus 2 negatives, we have 2 positives left over. If we check our answer, great. Now let's take a look at some examples that we're going to come up with. So let's take a look at 6 positives plus 2 negatives. So if I drag onto the board 6 positives, and I drag 2 negatives, and we press continue, think about making all of your pairs of 0. So I'm going to pair up a positive with a negative. That gives me 0. Pair up another positive with a negative. That again gives me 0. And we look to see what we have left over. We look like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 positives left over. We check. Great. Let's try another one. 3 plus a negative 5. So we've got 3 positives. We've got 5 negatives. Now before we proceed, I want you to go ahead and start predicting what it's going to be. You always want to take a look at which one would you have more of. If we have 3 positives and we have 5 negatives, do we have more positive chips or do you have more negative chips? In this case, we're going to have more negative chips. We have 5 of those, whereas we only have 3 positives. So since we have more of the negatives than we do of the positives, then our answer is in fact going to be negative. Then we're going to create, well, first we're going to press continue. Then we're going to create all our pairs of 0. So imagine that 3 of these negative chips are going to combine with these 3 positive chips. So that's what I'm doing right now. And once you do all of the combining, the ones that are left over are our 2 negative chips here. So our answer is going to be -2. Great. Now let me write you a problem, and first I want you to predict it, what you think might be the answer, before I actually model it here on the screen. Let's take a -1 plus 4. Okay, so before I actually model this, I want you to think we've only got 1 negative chip and we have 4 positive chips. So this 1 positive chip, one of these 4, will pair up with this 1 negative chip. And then how many will we have left over? Let's see. 1 negative chip, 4 positive chips. If we pair these up, oops, gotta press continue first. If we pair these up, we do in fact have 3 positives left over. Very good. Now, what if this time we add -4 and -2? Now, before I model this, I want you to think. We're going to have 4 negatives and 2 more negatives laying out on our board. Are we going to be able to combine and make any pairs of 0? Are any of them going to be able to drag on top of each other and disappear? Well, let's see. We've got 4 negative chips. We have 2 more negative chips. Can I drag these on top of each other and make them disappear? The answer is no, because they're all negatives. I don't have any positives, which are opposites, to combine and give me 0. So none of these are going to disappear. So my answer is just 4 negatives and 2 more negatives, which gives me a total of 6 negatives. We want to check our answer, and great. Let's try another. -3 plus -5. So first you want to ask yourself, how many pairs of 0 can we make? Can we make any of these pair up and cancel out, disappear? Well, let's take a look. 3 negatives and 5 more negatives. Do we have any that we can pair up? No, I don't have any opposites. No positives and negatives. All I have are negatives. So I'm going to get a total sum of -8. Try another. -2 plus 8. So you want to ask yourself, how many pairs of 0 can I make? Can you even make any? Let's see. 2 negatives, 8 positives, can we make any pairs of 0? Yes, this time we can. I can drag this positive chip onto this negative one, and this positive chip onto this negative one. So I could make 2 pairs. How many am I going to have left over? That would be a total of 6. So let's see if we can draw some conclusions. I'm going to type it instead of trying to write with my airliner. If you add 2 negative numbers, the answer will always be negative. And that's because if you think about our models that we were doing, if you add 2 negative numbers together, so you're going to put down a certain number of negative chips and another number of negative chips, and you put all your negatives together, you can't make any pairs of 0. So all you're ever going to have down are negative chips. So your answer will always be negative. Likewise, move this out of the way. If you add 2 positive numbers, which you've been doing for a long time, the answer will always be positive. Now that should make sense because you've been adding positive numbers since first grade, maybe even before. Like 3 plus 2, which is 5. 7 plus 8, which is 15. So if you add 2 positive numbers, all you're going to have down there are positive chips, which means your answer is obviously going to be positive. Now, where it gets a little interesting is when we start mixing the two together. So for example, if you add a positive number and a negative number, the sum will sometimes be positive and sometimes be negative. You really don't know. There's not a certain answer like it is here when you're adding two negatives or two positives. And that's because you always have to ask yourself, do you have more positive chips or do you have more negative chips? And depending on which one you have more of, then your answer may be positive and your answer may be negative. Okay, you're going to want to practice adding these integers for quite some time. You want to be able to do this without any hesitation. So one way that you can practice this skill is using this site. And it's available on the website. So you can practice it just using the computer, where it randomly gives you several problems and you drag it in. Just remember to always press continue, unlike I did. Sorry. You can also type in user, and that's where I was entering my own problems here, so that you can have somebody make up some problems, or you can just make up some numbers, and then it will check your answer for you. Another great website, which will also be on the blog, one second, let me get it, is this one here. And it's just straightforward practice, but it's exactly what you need whenever you're adding these integers together. You'll call up this site here, and if you click on the which, adding blocks, there will be adding blocks problems. Oops, sorry, that's the wrong one. Let me try this again. Adding numbers test. And there will just be several problems here for you to do. And again, it's just basic skill drill, but if you can't do these and get 100%, then you're probably not ready to move on to subtracting yet. So you want to have mastered adding for sure before you start subtracting. So we think about 4 positives plus 3 negatives. You want to be able to do this completely without the other website. If you're first starting out, you can enter that problem 4 plus negative 3 here and drag your chips. But eventually you want to wean yourself off of that site and not use it at all. So 4 positives plus 3 negatives. 3 of these positives would pair up with 3 of these negatives. They would all cancel out to give me 0, and I'd be left with 1 positive. To answer, if you click here in the blank, it'll give you a little box to type into, and you can enter your answer. 6 negatives plus 2 more negatives. Since I don't have any positives to combine with those negatives, nothing's going to cancel out. So all I'm going to be left with are just negatives. That's all I have. So my answer is going to be negative 8. If we continue answering, 7 negatives plus negative 1, that gives me a total of 8 negatives. And then again, you'll just keep going through. When you've got all of them answered, if you click on score, it'll go through and it's going to tell you the ones that you missed and the ones that you got right. On the ones that you missed, you can simply click and it'll allow you to come up with a new answer. In this case, the answer would be negative 3. And then if you click on score, You can see if you got it right the second time. Again, you want to do this until you can get green check marks all the way through with no hesitation. Very important. Then you can move on to subtracting. Good luck with it, and let me know. Email me if you have any trouble with adding integers.